everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the Compass Academy Mayoral Runoff debate. My name is Olivia Owen, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies for the evening. As you may know, Compass Academy hosted a mayoral debate before the election earlier this month, and after the results of the election, it became evident that two candidates were favored over the others, Rebecca Casper and Barbara Ehardt. However, neither candidate had received the number of votes required to win the election, so it was decided that there would be a runoff election to determine the mayor of Idaho Falls. The Idaho Falls Chamber of Commerce approached us to request that Compass Academy host a final community debate for the remaining mayoral candidates. Tonight, Ms. Ehardt and Ms. Casper will answer the questions we gathered from the community. A lot of work has gone into this event, and we hope that this evening's debate will give you the insight into both of the candidates' views, opinions, and actions to help you make an informed decision when voting during this election. And now let's meet our candidates. Please welcome our current mayor, Rebecca Casper. Prior to holding the position of mayor of Idaho Falls, Ms. Casper was a professor at both Brigham Young University, Idaho, and Eastern Idaho Technical College. Public education in our school district is very important to Ms. Casper, and she is actively involved with improving them. Please welcome Councilwoman Barbara Ehardt. Ms. Ehardt has said, "Nothing prepares one for leadership like athletics does. The lessons learned through sports are more applicable to life than anything else one can do." Ms. Ehardt is a member of City Council, and she believes that this experience has allowed her more insight into how our community works. Let's give one more hand for our 2017 mayoral candidates. Good luck to both of you, and thank you so much for being here tonight. I would like to take a moment to introduce the students at the table in front of you. Our timekeepers tonight will be Erica Dillon and Kayla Meekum. And our moderator for the evening will be Mr. Jacob Rich. Mr. Rich, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you all very much for being here tonight. We are very thankful and humbled that you asked us to host this runoff debate. Now, before we get started, let's talk about the rules. Since it's just two candidates today, we decided we would be going alphabetically, so Mayor Casper, you will be going first. I will ask you a question, and you will have 2 minutes to respond. You do not have to fill this time, but you may not go over. If you go over 2 minutes, I will have to cut you off. Your opponent will then answer the same question, following the same rules, and after they answer, you will be given the option of 30 seconds to respond. That will go for every question. Whoever started the question will have a 30-second opportunity to respond. You do not have to use that time, but if you do, it will simply be green light when your time begins and red light when your time is off. You will be assisted by this lighting system I just showed you. When your time begins, a green light will come on. When you have 30 seconds remaining, a yellow light will come on. And when your time is up, a red light will come on, and I'll have to cut you off. We are not very worried about it, but we just, in the course of political civility, please keep it civil, only talk when it is your turn to talk, etc. Just common decency. So the question portion will begin right now. Mayor Casper, let's start with a fairly broad question. What vision do you have for Idaho Falls 10 to 20 years from now? And what can we do today to help us prepare for that vision?
It's a great question. I think that 10 to 20 years out, I want Idaho Falls to be even stronger in some of the positions that it already holds. We are, as I often tell people, the largest city east of Ada County. We have naturally then a leadership position, a leadership role to play for this part of Idaho. Eastern Idaho looks to Idaho Falls for leadership. It looks to Idaho Falls as a commercial center. It looks to Idaho Falls as an entertainment and arts center. And I don't want to lose any of those opportunities or those titles that we have. Of course, they're unofficial titles, but Eastern Idaho also looks to Idaho Falls as a wonderful stopping off point for tourists on their way to points north. And so we are also a tourist destination for many. Some may be accidental, and some, we hope, is on purpose. And of course, some of that is on purpose is there because people want to come to the Museum of Idaho, people want to come to the zoo, people want to come and see the arts and the plays and shows that we have going on here. I would like to improve our ability to bring people here rather than having them leak off and go to Boise or go to Salt Lake City for some of that entertainment. That's where the Idaho Falls Event Center comes in. I'm hoping with a 10 to 20 year timeline, we'll be able to see the completion of the event center by then. One of the primary objectives for an event center is to allow us to host sporting venues and other entertainment type things that we currently just don't have the space and resources for. It also would help us to be a center for conventions and trade shows and things like that. So I see Idaho Falls continuing to be in a leadership role in this community. We do need to do some planning in order to get there.
Thank you, Mayor Casper.
Thank you.
The question is now yours, Councilwoman Ehardt.
Well, thank you. Let me see if I might even take this a slightly different direction. Because so much of the future depends on what the present is going to offer. And as I look at these last 4 years, I've worked tirelessly on your behalf, and the only person that I've ever answered to is you. I value my personal integrity, and the person that I am on Sunday is the same person I am every day of the week. You can count on me because I'm consistent. And I stood by the principles on which I first ran. You know, there are many areas in which the mayor and I differ, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing for all of you because you do have a choice. But when we look to the future and we think about some of the things that have been mentioned, another key difference was revealed on November 20th during our East Idaho debate, and that had to do with the question about religious freedom, basically. And you should all know that essentially I am tired of the political correctness that's beginning to dictate our lives. Phrases such as Merry Christmas or God or even cannot be spoken or offered officially by the city of Idaho Falls. These are our God-given constitutional rights, and no one should be offended that I'm desirous to exercise these rights. What many people fail to realize is that in moving forward in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, that our First Amendment rights to freedom of speech is directly linked to our freedom of religion. If you remove from the public square the rights to discuss, practice, and live your religion, you have also systematically limited your own freedom of speech. And the mayor and I see religion and the role it plays very differently. I believe in protecting these rights, and I believe that the city should be a standard bearer going forward for how religion and government can coexist. And we need to remember that if we're not willing to fight for these freedoms at the local level, they'll never, ever be upheld at the national level. And so I see what we do right now important to the direction the city goes in 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. Mayor Casper, would you like 30 seconds to respond?
I don't think I'm going to take that opportunity right now.
Thank you. The next question begins with you, Councilwoman Ehardt. We recognize that it's difficult to get into a specific tax number in a 2-minute response. So speaking more broadly, how would you describe your personal tax philosophy? When are new taxes necessary and justifiable? When are tax cuts needed? And do you see the city's current tax rate as fair and reasonable?
You know, this is something on which I really have been running. One of my key points, that I do believe that taxes serve a purpose. Obviously, we all know that taxes serve a purpose, but one of the problems that we're facing here in Eastern Idaho, actually in all of Idaho, not just in Idaho Falls, is the fact that even though we have had a low unemployment, and now this is coming from Robert Spendlove even, who's a Zions Bank economist, and he's here in August and made these points. Even though we've had a low unemployment, one of the most unique things about Idaho, and certainly Idaho Falls, is that our wages have remained stagnant for years. Your wages, my wages, are not growing. Meanwhile, though, all things pertaining to your livelihood is getting larger and larger. Your taxes certainly are getting larger, but the cost of doing business, the cost of certainly your everyday living, and we all know the cost of healthcare is growing. At what point we have to ask ourselves, does government need to rein in that which they're doing so as to support you in that which you're doing? Your freedoms are directly tied to the taxes you pay. The more taxes you pay, the less freedoms you have. And all I'm saying is that we need to basically hold back, pull back, and say, hey, the city of Idaho Falls has an incredibly healthy budget. We do. There are a lot of different ways that we can spend, and one of my main points has been wants versus needs. I have said that since I first ran in 2009. The city, in my opinion, needs to do a better job of outlining its wants versus needs, and that discussion should be one that begins with the city council, an in-depth discussion with the city council as we lay out with the directors what direction that we're planning to go, what things we need to hit first. We have things that are falling apart, such as the aquatic center, that we haven't even discussed at all. To me, that's a matter of wants versus needs, and that's how I plan to go forward. We have a healthy budget. We have means of accomplishing the things that we need to accomplish within the budget framework that we have. That's how I plan to go forward.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. The question is now yours, Mayor Casper.
My personal tax philosophy probably keys off of the idea that, first of all, that taxes are necessary at each level of government to provide the services that level of government provides. And I have often told the city directors that they need to lay out for us what it costs for them to provide the services. And then we have to figure out, we, the elected officials, have to figure out how can we cut, what can we do to still maintain a high level of service without completely failing to deliver an adequate level of service, right? We have to somehow find that balancing point between what's adequate and what's too much or too expensive. And I tell them, what I've told them is, tell us what it's going to cost, and then let us figure it out from there. And the let us part is letting the elected officials figure it out. The budget process is an interesting one, and it's one where we do ask the experts within each city department to lay out what they foresee being the needs for the coming year or the opportunities for the coming year. And then those are gathered up and presented. I whittle them down so that they're reasonable and that they're not beyond what the city's ability to pay is. But we take the things that we've cut and we put them on a wish list, and we let the council members see that as well as the budget that's presented. And then the budget is there for the council members, and they spend an entire month meeting, 18, 24 hours in any given year they spend poring over the elements of the budget. And those discussions are held. And when they make those determinations, they are acting in the best interests of the citizens that elected them. And that's the process that we have. Tax cuts are needed when you are bringing in more money than you need to provide the services that you are called upon to provide. But tax cuts and fees need to be adequate in order to provide those services. When the cost of gasoline or health care for employees, when those things go up,
Thank you, Mayor
necessarily
Casper.
need more money.
Would you like to take an opportunity to respond, Councilwoman Ehardt? All right.
Just a couple of side points. You know, I tend to be fairly creative. I think that we should look at the budget in creative manners. And one of the things that I had really worked hard to do, for example, and where I think money could be better spent, was we just recently ended up spending $700 plus on 4-H property that we had an opportunity to trade with the county. And the county was very excited. And even after it officially had taken place, the county said they still would like to have traded that property. We could have traded that property. Of course, we differ on the signage and wayfaring. I do not believe
Thank you,
that money.
Councilwoman Ehardt.
Okay.
The next question is for you, Mayor Casper. The city of Ammon has gained national recognition for its municipal citywide fiber optic network. A 12-month Harvard case study showed that the Ammon model created more competition and better internet quality with little to no financial risk to the city. At a recent conference touting the Ammon model, former FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler delivered a video speech. Here's what he had to say.
Hello, Ammon. It's a privilege to be with you today. I wish I could be with you physically. I'd love to drive down Hit Road and see how on one side of the road there is all kinds of economic activity spurred on by fiber connectivity as compared to the other side. of the road. America needs to pay attention to what you have been doing. America needs to discover Ammon.
Despite him not mentioning our city by name, how would you respond to Mr. Wheeler's comments? Where is Idaho Falls currently when it comes to fiber connectivity, and where would you want to see us heading in the future?
Well, I think it's important for everybody to know that Idaho Falls has been in the fiber business for longer than Ammon has been in the fiber business. We offer what's known as dark fiber. We sell we first got into the fiber business because we needed that technology to be able to conduct proper servicing of our electric utility, and then it spread to being able to deliver proper servicing for dispatch and emergency dispatch services. And as we found that as we developed it, we were able to lease fiber pairs to private sector industries. And then what they do with them is their choice. And many of them use those to then deliver fiber optic service to their customers. Or in some cases, the school district, they get their fiber from the city of Idaho Falls. The laboratory gets its fiber from the city of Idaho Falls. So Mr. Wheeler, it's clearly he'd never been to our community because both sides of Hit Road benefit from fiber optic technology. The Ammon model is one of many different kinds of service delivery models that communities across the country are using. Idaho Falls Power and the board, which is the city council, they wear two hats. Wearing the hat of board members for Idaho Falls Power, last year they commissioned a study of community fiber and how Idaho Falls could maybe think about transitioning from dark fiber leased to business to lit fiber to the home. And the study indicated that it presented all of the different models. And the Ammon model is a little bit risky in that if you start to compete with the private sector within your own community, you do run the risk of lawsuits, and we have been told that we stand a very good chance of being sued if we tried something like that. But something else that's interesting is that the Ammon model is an opt-in model. And so households opt into it by paying. And one of the things that we have found through that study is that there's something out there known as the digital divide, where communities can be distinguished by neighborhoods that can afford fiber and neighborhoods that can't.
Thank you, Mayor
Something to think
Casper.
about.
The question is now yours, Councilwoman Ehardt.
You know, this is something that we've addressed before, and I've addressed it before, and certainly there's a lot of truth in some of the things that Mayor Casper shared, but that's looking back at where we were. We're always moving forward. And the thing that I've long admired about Ammon, and I've wanted to have these discussions, is Ammon's moving forward. And they're out there trying to do new things and make things happen. And it's exciting. And when you talk about driving down the side of Hit Road and looking at what's happening, half the time you have to remember the perception is reality. And right now, that side's booming. You cannot deny that Ammon is booming, and they're booming in business. And part of that, no doubt, is the attraction that you have with the fiber model. And the opt-in model, as I think about it, we should be looking at all things. And we should not be scared about potential lawsuits because Ammon is moving forward. I have long advocated that we have more talks with Ammon, that we have more talks with the county, but we're being prevented from having those discussions that we as the council should be having, council to council, council with county, engaged in these discussions to see what direction would be best suited for Idaho Falls. And you know, the other thing that we have to remember, even as we try to make the best decisions for the citizens of Idaho Falls, that government should not be picking the winners and losers. And so as government is out there and they're offering options, government's biggest responsibility is to get out of the way of private business and allow businesses to do, and even private individuals to do those things that they want to do as best as they possibly can. So I just would like to see Idaho Falls and Ammon basically have more discussions. I don't want to see Ammon envy. I think that right now they're doing a fantastic thing, and we need to look to Ammon as a possible model for things that Idaho Falls can be doing. There's nothing wrong with following Little Ammon. They've done a fantastic job. We should just acknowledge it.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. Mayor Casper, would you like to take time to respond?
If I could, I'll just mention a couple things. One, the city did hold listening posts earlier this year to invite community members to come in and share their views on fiber. And so there's an effort being made to ensure that the community is part of the dialogue. Secondly, nothing is preventing the City of Idaho Falls board members for Idaho Falls Power from having that conversation. We just simply haven't delved into it so much. But if there's a council member or a board member who wants to have those conversations, they can make those needs known, or that desire known, and then that can be scheduled to come up earlier.
Thank you, Mayor Casper. The next question is for you, Councilwoman Ehardt. Some of the city's budget is used for maintaining or improving the city's image, like new signs, beautification projects, or redevelopment of rundown areas. Where would spending on the physical image of the city rank in your budgeting priorities, and why?
Well, first off, Idaho Falls is a beautiful place. I mean, I grew up here, born and raised here, made a conscious decision to come back here. A lot of things definitely have been done, including by private businesses or entities such as the Rotors, to help make sure that Idaho Falls is a beautiful place. You know, I have a hard time when we all think of our own personal and private budgets. We usually address our needs first before we address our wants. And that's really probably, again, where we differ, because there are some, and there are always going to be needs, but there's some heavy needs, including a new police station. I definitely believe that Idaho Falls needs to do something about the police station, not just for our police, but for those people, including victims, who find themselves down there. It's not conducive. It's not conducive to what the needs are today and given the population we have today. So when we talk about doing signage and wayfaring, which the mayor has even said in other debates, that's not meant for the citizens of Idaho Falls. And so that's meant for people who actually already come into our city. Those signs did not bring the people into our city. They came into our city, and then there were the signs. And the signs are in upwards of $1.2 million. And then you add on top of that, for example, as I said, the 4-H property at over $700,000. And right there you have a great down payment, $2 million that can go towards a police station. I would just reprioritize, or at least try to take us through reprioritizing the things on which we spend money. Just like you have to do within your own home, your own household, you have to make some tough decisions and decide what's most important. But again, those are huge discussions in which we'd probably just lock ourselves in a room, you know, with things being televised for a day, going over with the council what are our most important priorities.
Thank you, Councilwoman. The question is now yours, Mayor Casper.
Thank you. I don't know how many of you have heard of the broken windows theory, but the idea is that if you do not repair, the simplest interpretation, if you don't repair a broken window when it shows up, say, on a vacant property, pretty soon someone will throw the next rock and break the next window and the next, and pretty soon you have an area that started off with just one broken window. It has become a completely blighted area. And that's a really rough interpretation of this theory, but the idea is if you don't take care of areas that look bad, you are inviting them to look worse in the future. And so it is very important that the city take note of the areas of town that that are run down, that need to be revitalized, that need to be taken care of. And because we don't want things to get worse. Because when things get worse, they invite not just broken windows, not just some weeds to grow, but they also might invite crime. They might invite behaviors, gang behaviors and things like that, or allow them to flourish in ways that we don't want. We don't want citizens of this community avoiding parts of town because they don't feel safe or they're not pleasant to be in. And so it does, and then extend that beyond that. If we allow certain parts of town to degenerate, the tax base also degenerates, and we end up with parts of town that end up costing us money to protect, but they don't generate money in terms of tax revenue. We have to keep the city looking good. We have to pay attention to these things. Signage and wayfinding is perhaps to some a beautification type of an initiative, but other things, planting flowers, mowing the lawns, having the city look attractive, those are parts of those are things you do in order to keep the value up. As far as revitalization, we've talked about that in the previous debate. That is something that's a high priority for me. I've identified that First Street needs a little bit of TLC, parts of Northgate Mile need a little bit of TLC, and we have just applied for a very large grant that we hope will come in and allow us to do some study.
Thank you, Mayor Casper. Would you like time to respond, Councilwoman
Absolutely.
Ehardt?
One of the key points that she brought up was a broken window theory, and you know, it's interesting that I was one of the key council members who had been pushing for the last couple of years and working behind the scenes to make sure that we enforce our codes, because it's our codes that are, those are the ordinances that allow us to keep neighborhoods looking good and keep the windows from being broken. And so I absolutely am one of those people that believe if you're going to have an ordinance, by gosh, let's enforce it. Otherwise, why have the ordinance? And so I think that that's completely different than prioritizing our wants versus needs when we're spending money.
Thank you, Councilwoman. This next question begins with you, Mayor Casper.
Okay.
Idaho Falls has long been an innovative and forward-thinking city when it comes to power generation. With the INL's current work on small modular reactor technology, Idaho Falls may have another opportunity to position itself on the cutting edge of power innovation. How do you envision the future of Idaho Falls Power? And as mayor, how would you leverage our energy opportunities to create jobs and keep our power costs low?
This is a really fun question. Idaho Falls Power is a source of great pride for our community. It allows us, the good management there and the investment that has come from previous generations of elected officials, the investment in those 4 power generating facilities along the Snake River, have allowed us to have one of the lowest power rates in the nation. Even in a bad water year, when the water doesn't flow as plentifully down the river, we still are able to maintain low power rates because we have some excellent management and excellent employees at Idaho Falls Power. It is definitely something that I want everybody who is an Idaho Falls resident to sit up and feel proud about. We're going to protect that going forward by making sure that we have a board of directors that's well trained, that we have that we only hire and maintain the best employees there. Sometimes that costs a little bit of money for us to get the best and the brightest, but it's definitely worth that investment. As far as the investment that Idaho Falls Power is making along with other utilities, I can't remember how many now are participating in the small modular reactor project. I think it's upwards of 20-something utilities sprinkled throughout a 5-state or 7-state region are interested in the SMR project. Partly because the small modular reactors using nuclear technology are going to give us power that's green. It's not carbon emitting. It's giving us power that will be, we hope, as we move forward, affordable and able to compete on the energy market with even natural gas, which is a very popular and currently affordable means of generating power. The small modular reactor is a way that we can be part of the future, and we will be the first in the world to have this technology, and that will afford us all kinds of opportunity for training others who will come to visit, and much like how Compass was the first in the region.
Thank you, Mayor Casper. The question now goes to you, Councilwoman Ehardt.
Excellent, thank you. You know, we are absolutely blessed to live in Idaho Falls, and that those people who had gone before us had the vision to basically tap into the hydropower that we now have. Some of this happened when we think about the bonds that we just retired 2 years ago, year and a half ago. That happened, those bonds came about when I was a youth right here in Idaho Falls. Those were discussions that took place when I was growing up, and how fortunate that those decisions were made. So I absolutely embrace all things to do with Idaho Falls Power. Also, again, as a youth growing up, we've always had the site here, and it was something that I think everyone who lived in Idaho Falls just embraced because of what it meant. And you know, we used to have even more of a footprint here when the Navy was here and doing more work here. But it's absolutely important that we stay on the cutting edge and involved in all of this. And I do give huge kudos to the mayor as far as being involved and seeing the importance of that. You know, but as we look at going forward, one of the things that I said when I was first elected to the council, coming from kind of more of that conservative background, people would tell me, oh, you know, you got to run the city like a business. And so ironically, one of the first things that I realized as I was assigned as a liaison to Idaho Falls Power is that we are looking at people that are very specialized. And there aren't that many people throughout the United States that do what our director, Jackie Flowers, and even her assistant, Bear Prairie, do. These are some very specialized and unique skill sets that we do have to work to keep. And so when it came time to look at giving the 2 of these raises, I was in whole support of doing that because the alternative was not going to be good for Idaho Falls. And so I will continue to do those things that keep us at the forefront, using the natural resources we have and protecting the natural resources that we have, and making sure as much as possible we are absolutely involved with the INL. What a blessing it is to have them here in Idaho Falls with us.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. Mayor Casper, would you like the time to respond.
If I could just very quickly point out, in the question, it talks about the INL's current work on small modular reactor technology. I just want to point out that the NuScale SMR that we're looking at was developed not at the INL, but by others in another part of the country. But INL is very, very supportive. So I just want to make sure that there's understanding amongst audience members that the NuScale technology wasn't developed at the INL, but that they are a big part of this bringing forward next generation, next generation nuclear technology.
This next question is for you, Councilwoman Ehardt. Imagine I am a business owner who's considering moving my operations to Idaho Falls. What would you say to convince me that your city is a place for me? What benefits would my businesses have in Idaho Falls that I might not have elsewhere? And what could you do as mayor to give my business opportunities to succeed?
The first thing I'm going to do is invite you to come to Idaho Falls, and we are going to drive and walk through Idaho Falls, because when you come to Idaho Falls and you walk our greenbelt, and when you go throughout our city, you're going to see why so many people like me, who was born and raised here and made the decision for a career opportunity to leave and try other opportunities, but made that decision to come back. There's a reason that we made that decision to come back. And so first, we're going to introduce you to Idaho Falls visually. Then what we're going to do is we're going to introduce you to the people of Idaho Falls. People have long talked about the quality of life in Idaho Falls, and basically it's based on those things that the government can offer. I have long said the quality of life in Idaho Falls is based on that which the people can offer. We have a unique set of people here, and if you, as a business owner, have a family, and if you have children, one of the main things I'm going to show you and help you to understand is you will not be able to find a better place on the face of this earth to raise a family, to be able to bring your children, to feel safe, to be able to raise them with the principles that I believe this country was founded, and to be able to put them in an environment where they will be able to learn. You know, sometimes I think we get a bad rap for education, but we have fantastic educators, some of whom are right here at Compass Academy. Many of the things that are happening in Idaho Falls are on the cusp of innovative and leading out on ideas that are going to help change the direction that we take in approaching education. And we also have BYUI just down the road that's doing the very same thing and changing the way we think about how we have for years and years and years approached education in such an archaic manner. I am going to show you these things, and then we're going to sit down and we're going to say, how quickly can you make it here at Idaho Falls? Because you are going to want to be here.
Thank you, Councilwoman. The question now goes to you, Mayor Casper.
Well, there are a lot of things that I would say to a business that was considering relocating to Idaho Falls. First thing I'd want to point out to them is our low utility rates, right? Our power rates are low, our water and sewer rates are low, our development costs are low. Those fees that you pay to construct and get pay the permits and such don't cost as much in Idaho Falls as they do in other parts of eastern Idaho. I would also point out that the tax rates, which have been a subject of a lot of conversation in this campaign, the tax rates in Idaho Falls are lower than the ones you're going to find in Pocatello. They're lower than the rates you're going to find in Rigby. They're lower than the rates you're going to find in Blackfoot. And then when you factor in the utilities, the effective cost of doing business in Idaho Falls is lower than Ammon as well as Rexburg. So I would say Idaho Falls is a great choice for those reasons, because the dollars you lay out are going to be competitive or better here. I would also point out that the work that we've done to strengthen our fire department has given us the opportunity to move from what is known as an ISO 3 rating to an ISO 2 rating. There are only 2 cities in all of Idaho that have an ISO 2 rating, Idaho Falls and Meridian. This allows us to have lower fire insurance rates, and so those costs are going to be lower for businesses coming in. I will tell you too that as a future business owner, you will have the opportunity to work with our fire department and the fire inspector to make sure that we're doing all we can to make sure that your building is safe, that your rates are going to be lower that way. When it comes to economic development and growth opportunities, we also have an economic development coordinator who works for the city, who is there to help you with questions, with problems, and help you work through the system, almost as your personal navigator, so that we can have that one-stop shopping for businesses that need to interact with the city. I will tell you that if you have problems, our doors are open and we'll be able to help solve those problems. I will also point out that we as a city stand ready to help hook you into resources that are available to help you develop.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Ehardt, would you like the opportunity to respond?
Absolutely. You know, as you noticed, I didn't mention anything about the cost of living or taxes because I believe that that can be a detriment in attracting businesses here. And one of the things that I'm very concerned about moving forward is that as businesses are looking to locate in this area, that they can continue to locate in the county or in Ammon and enjoy every amenity that Idaho Falls has to offer without paying for them. So that's why I took the more emotional approach, and hopefully as we continue in the future, if I'm the person that you choose to elect, we're going to have those tax discussions and see if we can do more things.
Thank you, Councilwoman
You
Ehardt.
bet.
The next question is for you, Mayor Casper. As we ask citizens about issues that matter to them, some express concerns about our community losing its identity as we grow. In your view, what is our city's identity, and how would you go about preserving the qualities that residents love about Idaho Falls?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever thought about our identity, but I think that my interpretation of that would be something along the lines of the fact that Idaho Falls, by virtue of the fact that it's been home to the INL and has given birth to the nuclear Navy's programs over the years, and so much development that's made our nuclear Navy possible happened here. We have always sort of been at the cutting edge for many decades of things that serve our nation and that are innovative. And I think maybe innovation should be part of our middle name or part of the identity that we hold as a city. I do think that this is interesting. We also have a heritage. We have a heritage that needs to be preserved, as the question talks about preserving. And just looking at Totfus Park and the story there, or Kate Curley, you know, the namesake of another park. We need to keep, last year, two years ago, we celebrated the sesquicentennial, which is the 150th anniversary of the city of Idaho Falls. And that gave us an opportunity to celebrate a lot of those elements of our heritage. And we had celebrations one a month for several months. And one of my favorite things was in the concluding month. I believe it was in October of 2015. We had a storytelling night at the Museum of Idaho. And we invited people to come in and share their memories, their stories of Idaho Falls. And it was heartwarming and remarkable to see some residents bring in photographs and talk about catching frogs on Crow Creek, which now is pretty much paved over with housing and subdivisions and, you know, people's backyards, or it's been piped under. But it was just interesting to hear those stories, and those are things that, with the help of the Museum of Idaho, that has a beautiful Idaho section to it, we are able to maybe be innovators for the future. That's a part of our heritage, but also preserve the pioneer aspect of our heritage too. I think we have the ability to do both.
Thank you, Mayor Casper. The question now goes to you, Councilwoman Ehardt.
If you want to know about the heritage of Idaho Falls, then I am the person to ask. Somebody that was born and raised here and had grown up here and had learned about the heritage of Idaho Falls. I will tell you briefly, Idaho Falls is a God-fearing, flag-waving, patriotic, pioneer-loving, love this country kind of people. That's the kind of person that I am. That's how I was raised. That's what we are. When I talk about quality of life, again, I'm not talking about the things that government can do for us. I'm talking about the quality of people by whom we're surrounded on a daily basis. People that embrace values that seem old-fashioned to other people. If you were to take Idaho Falls and put it somewhere back east, I'm sure we would not be accepted quite like we are here in our own special, unique area of the country. But what makes us special, again, is we are, without a doubt, a group of people that we love this country. We believe in patriotism. We believe in God, family, and country. And that's the kind of person that I was raised as. That's who we are.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. Mayor Casper, would you like 30 seconds to respond?
Well, I wanted to add something, and that is I didn't address the portion of the question that talked about those who are expressing concern about growth. I think that one of the elements of growth that some people don't think about when they worry about us getting too big or unwieldy or will we lose our small town identity. One thing to remember is that as we grow, we create jobs and that allow our kids to stick around. If we want our community's heritage to be personal, we need to keep our kids here and not send them away for educational opportunities and not send them away for those great jobs. So when we grow, we create that opportunity to keep kids home.
Thank you, Mayor Casper. The next question is for you, Councilwoman Ehardt. One of the many responsibilities of the mayor of Idaho Falls is to work with the Bonneville County Commissioner. What is one specific issue you could anticipate as a potential conflict of interest between the city and the county, And what would you do to fight for the city's interests while maintaining a positive relationship between the offices of mayor and county commissioner?
All right. Well, let me first say that I have had and continue to have a fantastic relationship with our commissioners. It's been unique through the years. Even Commissioner Lee Staker, who just retired, had just a fantastic relationship, as I had coached his grandson for years in basketball. But I believe that the best way to deal and create relationships is something that should not always be done in the middle of work. If every time that we need to get something done with someone else and it becomes a little difficult, if that's all we're dealing with them in regards to the difficult matters, I think that relationships become harder. So you're saying, then what are you proposing? What I do with so many people these last 4 years and before that, we go to lunch. We go to lunch and we talk and we develop a relationship outside of the workplace so that we have invested, as Stephen Covey would say, we need to invest in each other's emotional bank account. So when it comes to the hard things and where we really need to get down to business, so to speak, that we can do so without making it personal, that we can keep it on what's best for both the county, because we need to remember that Idaho Falls is a member of the county too, but the county and the city. In looking at a particular problem that maybe has existed and what will come forward, that's hard to say. Looking backwards, I think my relationship has just been fantastic. And when it's come to some of the conflicts where the city has been, I've been able to go in and just speak with them. And again, we've just asked for meetings where the county and the council can just meet together to go work through some of these problems, and we just haven't been able to do it. So again, I'm all for meetings. I believe that when we invest in each other, that's how we make sure that we're able to go forward without making things personal and accomplish the task for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. The question now goes to you, Mayor Casper.
Working with the Bonneville County Commissioners is definitely, as the question states, an important part of being in city leadership. And Councilwoman Ehardt is correct. Relationships do matter there. I would like to, moving forward, revive something that we started off doing in the first 2 years, and that was having meetings between the City of Idaho Falls, City of Ammon, the cities of Yukon and Iona were also invited, and we met jointly as councils and with the commissioners. And in those large meetings, we were able to identify issues of concern, countywide issues of concern. And originally, we had some opportunity to make some progress working on some of those areas. I think as we were taking turns and rotating who was hosting the meetings, at one point, someone whose responsibility it was to host a meeting, it just dropped off their agenda, and that next meeting never got scheduled, and then everybody got busy, and we haven't scheduled one since. And so I'd like to revive that practice. We got a lot accomplished, I think, early on because of that. But going forward, I think there are some areas where we are going to need to roll up our sleeves and work pretty hard. I will stop, though, before I mention those and just acknowledge that we've had great success just recently in having the city purchase the 4-H property to allow for the expansion of the zoo southward. And that's just incredibly exciting, given that that's been on the it's been a talking point for a couple of decades at least. And so to say that we've got it accomplished is good. Moving forward, I think that we're going to see that a discussion about dispatch, which is the 911 center, and how that is to be managed and funded and properly staffed, may be an interesting discussion that will take both sides giving a little bit. I also think that discussion of courts and the administration and management of the courts and how much each entity contributes will also be an area where there will be some differences of opinion that we'll have to work on.
Thank you, Mayor Casper. Councilwoman Ehardt, would you like 30 seconds to respond?
Absolutely. Looking at some of the things that have happened recently as in April, we've had our commissioners asking, Commissioner Roger Christensen asking that we schedule these meetings with the council and with the county, and these meetings were basically denied. And as Roger Christensen was asking for these, he even started including all the council in the emails. We even had a separate meeting then scheduled with the council that ended up getting canceled by the mayor. We need to have these meetings. They are important to have communication going forward.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. Mayor Casper, the next question is for you.
Okay.
Political action committees, such as Businesses for Growth, are highly influential on a national scale, but have not traditionally played a large part in our local elections. Obviously, this has not been the case during this race. Do you believe political action committees or PACs have a place in our community, or do you see them as more beneficial or harmful to local nonpartisan politics?
Political action committees exist because Americans have free speech. We can spend our money and say and promote our ideas. And that's an incredibly important facet or element of being an American. It's something that is worth fighting for. And I think that political action committees, though they have not played a large role locally, don't have to be conceived of as being something that we fear or worry about. What we do have to fear or worry about is inaccurate messaging. Especially in this day and age when we don't just have one television station or one newspaper to look to for our source of information, but now we have instantaneous communication that goes out on a variety of platforms all at once. And if you have messaging that is disingenuous or inaccurate or malicious, then you create an atmosphere that is not conducive to a healthy community dialogue. That's what we have to worry about, our political action committees that don't have the community's interests in mind. Now, can we control for that if we believe in free speech? The answer is no. So what we have to do is gear ourselves up to be super citizens. We have to encourage our kids to do well in social studies and to care and understand what their local institutions are about and how they really work. We have to teach ourselves to strive to get our information from a variety of sources, so that we're not just believing one or two information streams that come to us and being persuadable and gullible that way. So we have to arm ourselves to be informed so that we can understand when a political action committee is feeding us good, useful information that we can chew on as voters and make a good voting decision, or when they're giving us baloney and malarkey and not true information that just confuse voters. Confusion will never breed good citizenship. So I do encourage all of you to arm yourselves with truth or learn how to seek out the facts.
Thank you, Mayor Casper. The question now moves to you, Councilwoman Ehardt.
Well, let's be honest, this is the first time I've ever been exposed, certainly personally, to something like a political action committee. And so in many respects, it caught me by surprise too. And, for me, and I mentioned this in the Post-Register, and I think it's very important, that, because the mayor's right, that we do have to be able to arm ourselves with inaccurate messaging or information or malicious information. But let's not forget that goes and cuts both ways. I can't help but at times feel a little bit of a victim of our local Post-Register with the news source that goes to everybody every day. And as I open that news source and I see things being written about me that I know absolutely are inaccurate and are not factual, and some of the malicious mean things that are said, that's not easy. And so not only do we have to arm ourselves, but we have to have a means by which we can question the things that are being said by all news sources. And so that's why I said in the paper, in a recent article that Mr. Clark had written, when he was asking me about this, I said, I cannot control the messaging of the PAC or of the Post-Register, or even of the mayor's campaign. All I can do is control my own messaging. And so even in the light of the PAC, which, as most people would probably say, well, then that was now put there to benefit Councilwoman Ehardt. No, it wasn't. It was put there in the first place when there were 5 people running for mayor. And so I have just tried to forge forward, just like on a basketball court. You have your game plan and you move forward. And yes, you have to make some adjustments, but you have your game plan, you have your team, and you go forward. And that's what I've tried to do.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. Mayor Casper, would you like 30 seconds to respond?
I would. I would like to express my disappointment that my opponent didn't take this opportunity to denounce the tactics and the untruths that the Political Action Committee that is clearly supporting her, whether she doesn't control it, but that they clearly are supporting her, and she didn't take this opportunity to denounce that kind of behavior. It hasn't been helpful. And in many cases, some of the confusion and misinformation that's been put out has actually detracted from the hard work and efforts of her fellow council members. We have an outstanding city council that has worked hard.
Thank you, Mayor Casper. The next question is for you, Councilwoman Ehardt. The Human Rights Campaign's Municipal Equality Index examines how inclusive municipal laws, policies, and services are of LGBTQ people who live and work there. In the 2017 index, city scores ranged anywhere from over 100 out of 100 in cities like San Diego, Los Angeles, and New York, to lower scores like 23 in Montgomery, Alabama, or 18 in Jackson, Wyoming. Idaho Falls received a middling equality index score of 41 out of 100, compared to the higher in-state scores of 71 in Boise and 75 in Pocatello. What opportunities do you see to make Idaho Falls more inclusive? And what would you do as mayor to ensure that every community member, no matter sexuality, religion, or ethnicity, feels welcomed and valued?
Well, first let me say, because this was a point of emphasis, it seemed like, not this, but this general conversation 4 years ago. And again, I need to stress that what's important to me is that our First Amendment rights to freedom of religion and freedom of speech are protected. I've had multiple conversations with our police force to ask, have we had any reported incidents where members of our LGBT community in Idaho Falls have basically had some crime or something reported that has not worked in their favor, and we have not received that. And so this municipal equality index is something that had come forward our first year on the council, and I remember writing a long letter saying that because they wanted to know and they wanted a response, and I wrote a letter to the mayor and I wrote a letter to the council, and I said, if we're going to take the time to respond to this, then I would hope that we take the time to respond to those entities that are also concerned about our religious freedoms, and such as Alliance Defending Freedom and Focus on the Family and Family Research Council, because they too would like to know where we are in regards to protecting our religious freedoms. So as soon as we open the door up to looking at one entity and are we being protective of it, I think the bigger question and the more important question is the city of Idaho Falls protecting the rights of the members of the city of Idaho Falls? That should be the most important question on our mind. As soon as we start breaking ourselves into these small little groups, then what happens is we become divided. And I do not want the city of Idaho Falls to become divided. I want to see us unite, where everyone, including the LGBT community, is accepted and protected equally to everyone else.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. The question is now yours, Mayor Casper.
Thank you very much. As many of you know, especially the students who've done the research for this question, the City of Idaho Falls did 4 years ago pass some anti-discrimination legislation or an ordinance. And that ordinance did prevent discrimination in terms of employment and in terms of residency or housing for members, or not members, but for LGBTQ persons. There's a third leg that many people talk about, and that is the public accommodations piece, where you can't be discriminated against in terms of getting service in the public, and that element was not included in that ordinance. Some cities in Idaho have passed ordinances that are more inclusive than ours, but we do have at least those two pieces in terms of employment and residency or housing. And so that accounts for why we have the score that we have on that municipality, I forgot the name of it now, the index. Every year that index comes across my desk, and I'm invited to fill it out and to elaborate on how we can improve our score. Another element that does help us to have some points in that index is that we do as a city not discriminate in any way based upon somebody's sexuality. And so that helps us as well have a higher score. What can we do to ensure that this inclusivity increases? It would require, according to this particular score, this index program, it would require that we have an LGBTQ advocate that the city hires or appoints to help counsel and bring out services and things to help those individuals to not feel so discriminated against or potentially feel discriminated against. And those are steps that I don't think that the council is ready to take to pay for that kind of an advocate within the city. That's just one example of what they're looking for with that particular index. But the idea of shining a light on what we
Thank you, Mayor Casper.
is important.
Would you like to take the opportunity to respond, Councilwoman Ehardt?
Absolutely. just briefly, let us not forget that I spent 15 years of my life working in Division I women's basketball, where I worked with many, 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 many gay women. The people by whom I was mentored and trained, many of these gay women were the most successful women with whom I have ever worked, ever in my life. And theirs are not stories of discrimination and deprivation, but they're stories of triumph and success. We can go forward and be the kind of community that we need to be, making sure that we take care of everybody's freedoms.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. The next question is for you, Mayor Casper. Citizens are concerned and frustrated about some infrastructure and upkeep projects that are overdue or moving too slowly. There are miles of aging underground pipes, much needed repairs to a swimming pool, and the need for a new rec center, just to name a few. Of course, there will never be room in the city's budget to finish all these projects at once. As mayor, what is one infrastructure or city improvement projects that you would make a priority, and what would you do to push that project forward?
Thank you. I actually don't think I can answer the question the way you asked it, and that is, you're saying, what is one thing? I think we can take a dual track at a minimum. And one would be to take heed to make sure that our water rates are appropriate so that we can get to the point where we're doing that 1% a year replacement of city water pipes. That alone will help put us on a better footing for being able to repair and replace that particular kind of aging infrastructure. And separate from that, because that's on the fee side of city resources, but on the tax side, we do have to take a look at building a new police headquarters. The headquarters that we have has been identified for over a decade as being inadequate, too small, and too old to really serve the needs of our police department. We don't have proper facilities for interrogation. We don't have proper facilities for victim interviews. We don't have proper facilities for our laboratory, for our evidence storage. All of those things need we just need better space. Officers are working, in really crowded conditions with in really rundown, with a rundown feel to the whole room, and it doesn't lend itself to the level of professionalism that they provide, professional protection that they provide. So we do need to figure out how we're going to pay for that fire station or the police station, and that probably will lend itself to some kind of bonding, because it's going to be a larger cost than we can afford to take out of existing city resources or existing savings accounts. And so that is, I think, one of the next biggest things we're going to have to tackle. And we have resources set aside in this year's budget to begin the planning process for siting the station and identifying how we're going to figure out all the different elements of funding that need to be put in place for that to become a reality. So look for that after the start of the year.
Thank you, Mayor Casper. The question now moves to you, Councilwoman Ehardt.
Well, since I already pointed out that I do believe that one of our needs, not our wants, but our needs, is a new police structure, let's go to something a little more, shall we say, community-minded as far as activities to do. Because I know that, as I always talk about wants versus needs, people think the only thing I'm ever going to tackle are the hard things. And that's not exactly true. As somebody who grew up in this community, I, as you've probably heard, I honed my basketball game playing at the rec center hours and hours. And it just, for me, what a fantastic experience. I also grew up, one of my first jobs was working at the old Elm Street pool. For any of you who remember that old Elm Street pool, right now, unfortunately, it's the parking lot of the YMCA, but it was a fantastic place to go swimming. Growing up there, having taken my swimming lessons and then working there, both as a lifeguard and water safety instructor, and then having the opportunity to manage it. I believe that we have enough of a budget in our park and rec budget. It would just be a matter of reallocating what priorities that we should have an outdoor swimming. And I'm not necessarily talking about a water park, because anytime you go to outdoor water facilities, it definitely costs money. And a pool is going to cost money, but gosh, we're here in Idaho Falls with 60,000 residents and we don't have an outdoor pool. It's hard for me to understand, especially someone who spent so many of their years teaching swimming lessons and loving being at that city pool. So that would be one thing that I would absolutely try to make a priority. And as I say, try to make a priority, again, keep in mind, all of these things will be coming to the council, because that's where it needs to go. The council is a policy-making board, and it needs to come before them. But it's something for which I'd push. And then the other thing that I've helped to push, because I'm an avid biker, is I'd like to see if we can move a little more quickly, again with reprioritizing, but some of the connecting our communities.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. Mayor Casper, would you like to take the opportunity to respond?
Two quick thoughts. One is that an outdoor swimming pool would be lovely, but it would only serve our needs 3 to 4 months of the year. With swimming becoming a sanctioned high school sport, we need an indoor swimming facility that will allow for year-round team practice. And so if we're going to invest money in swimming, it needs to be something that will serve the greater swimming needs of the community and not just a little bit of outdoor recreation in the summer. Secondly, I'll point out that a rec center is an absolute need. I think it comes, unfortunately, in priorities level, it comes behind a police station. But I'll point out that it's interesting to me.
Thank you, Mayor Casper.
Oh, darn it.
Sorry. The next question is for you, Councilwoman Ehardt. As the mayor of a city, it's important to stay up to date on the latest issues and events within the city. What are some of the current hot topics that you are involved with, but the general public may not be aware of? As mayor, how would you stay up to date on important issues?
Well, in today's day and age, it's much easier to stay up to date on hot topics and what's happening in other cities just by virtue of our social media. You can do conference calls anymore. You don't have to travel. You can get on conference calls, Skype, whatever the case may be, go to meetings, and you can be part of a meeting halfway around the world. So it's, as far as staying abreast of that which is current and that which is important, I think that it's available to us right there. One of the issues on which I've been working behind the scenes, and I actually brought this up in the first one, and something that I feel very strongly about, and that's the issue and the topic of preparedness. Now, oftentimes when we hear that word, we only think in terms of families and individual preparedness, and I think we need, as a city, to look way beyond that. I believe that we need to look and work more closely with the county, as I've tried to do, in regards to preparedness for those potential catastrophes, maybe not even catastrophes, which could befall our area. Now that could happen. It could be something that we were affected by from something that happened nationally, or it could be something that happened right here in our own hometown. Now keep it in mind, having the site here presents some unique problems because no doubt by those who would do us harm, I'm sure at some point we are targeted. So I believe that and it's something with which I've had many discussions with Jackie Flowers in our public works, in our power, because I would continue to like to see us be in a position to, which will happen with small nuclear modules in the future, but detach from the grid. What can we do with key resources that if something happened, how long would the city be able to continue to operate and protect the city of Idaho Falls with key resources, key buildings going, and then how would we be able to assist other needs within the city? Now, as I say this also, it's very important that we interact.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt.
Okay.
The question now moves to you, Mayor Casper.
Let me just first point out something that I think is important for everybody to know and understand, and that is that the city and the county do have preparedness plans. If emergency or catastrophe were to strike us, we've already got people in place, teams in place, protocols in place for all of that to be taken care of. So there's no need to feel a sense of panic because you don't, because Councilwoman Ehardt thinks that we need more of that kind of planning. We do have incident management plans in place. Second thing I want to tell you is that there are a whole variety of things that I think a conscientious and an active mayor needs to be aware of. The first one would be to be paying attention to legislative issues and concerns. Every year we identify the Association of Idaho Cities, its legislative committee. We work to identify 10, 20, 25 different pieces of legislation that could have an impact on cities. Everything from planning to policing to cemeteries to infrastructure to wastewater treatment to all kinds of things. We have to keep track of what's going on there. And so that's something that does require a mayor's attention. Thankfully, we have the resources for that. I did mention earlier, and I'm happy to talk to others about this offline later, but we do have to pay attention to courts and court funding. Idaho Falls is uniquely situated in that debate and that discussion that's going on statewide. Idaho Falls residents pay a great deal to support county courts, and that's not necessarily equitable compared to other cities in the state, and so that's an ongoing conversation. We also do need to stay abreast of what's going on in the power world. A lot of energy resources in this country are being developed, and we need to stay on top of what's good for Idaho Falls residents. Smart cities, there's a whole movement for that, talking about sustainable resources, talking about how we can provide services for our citizens, being aware of GIS developments and how we can use that kind of data to really pinpoint neighborhoods and people.
Thank you, Mayor
need our help.
Casper. Councilwoman Ehardt, would you like to take the time to respond?
Absolutely. As the mayor so accurately pointed out, yes, we do have plans. I've been part of them with preparedness. But let me ask all of you, do you know what the plans are? Do you know what would happen if something happened? You do not know them. So the next step is to make sure that we get our community involved, and so that they understand what things will be happening if something should go wrong. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to connect with our religious leaders, because they have all religious denominations. They have the best pulse on what's happening within our community. So we need to connect with them to get that information out to you. And that's something we will do.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. This is the final question, and it goes to you, Mayor Casper. What have you gained or learned over the course of this mayoral election? And how do you think it will influence the choices you would make as mayor over the next 4 years?
Wow, I wish I had more time to think about that. What have I gained or learned? I have gained respect for the citizens of Idaho Falls and their willingness to understand how government works, their willingness to sift out fact from rumor, and that's been heartening. And I know that we have a whole cadre of citizens who are willing to be engaged and willing to even do the homework that it takes in order to cast a conscientious vote. And I do appreciate that very much. And I think I've also learned that through both the citizens review process that we set up over the last 4 years, I've learned that we have a whole slew of citizens who are interested in sharing their expertise, sharing their time, and providing their input into other city processes. Not necessarily just department management, which is what we focused on before, but possibly on other things going forward, such as code enforcement, or maybe the fiber issue, and other areas where we can incorporate even more citizen service. I will tell you that we already have over 25, 27, I've lost track, I haven't counted recently, but a great many boards, committees, and commissions. Some are required by ordinance and some are not. Some are more informal in nature, but we have a lot of opportunities for citizens to serve. We have a lot of citizens who take the time to write into council members who often have really insightful criticisms or suggestions and comments to make. And being able to pull them in and ask them to get to work and share what they have to make our city a better place is something that we've benefited from in the past, and I really want to pursue it in the future, because this election has kind of reminded me of how many people care. That's one of the things that makes Idaho Falls tremendous, is that people care.
Thank you, Mayor Casper. The question now goes to you, Councilwoman Ehardt.
Well, this has been quite the process. I know when we started out, certainly from my perspective, I had hoped that we would go into a runoff, because I figured that would probably be the only way that I would have an opportunity to be elected. And so going through this process, you certainly learn that the process is important. Being respectful is important. You learn that people matter. And as I look even back on my last 4 years, probably as much as anything, one of the most important things that I have done and that I said I would do is I listened. And I believe that one of the things I've been able to talk about during this election process is principles. And I've used that word a lot since the time I first ran in 2009, that I believed in principle-centered leadership. And I really do believe in that you have to know who you are, what are the things that are so important to you, that even if you have to stand alone at times, that you will stand alone, because you made promises. You portrayed yourself as one person, and the people voted for you based on that. And so you made promises, and to remain principally centered is important. And I also believe that, in going forward, what would help me as a mayor looking at the next 4 years is the fact that I care, and I believe in people, I believe in empowering people, and I believe that if you empower people and you engage people, that you will find the solutions that you need. I, as mayor, should not be expected to have all the solutions. I don't have all the answers. I can't be that intelligent. But what I can be good at is leadership and helping to direct us so that we can get the right answers from the right people for you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ehardt. To keep the rules intact, Mayor Casper, would you like 30 seconds to respond?
Hopefully it won't take 30 seconds, but I will quickly mention that I think that one can still maintain one's principles and not have to stand completely alone in doing it. This community is a principled community, and I think an effective leader is able to persuade others to be able to share the vision and the goals and not have to stand alone, because everybody in Idaho Falls that I've encountered that cares about the city government is principled. So,
Thank you, Mayor Casper. That was the end of the 2017 mayoral runoff debate. Before I hand it over to our Master of Ceremonies, Olivia Owen, I would like to just remind the audience, let's not get caught up in the heat of election season. We are all Idaho Falls citizens, and we're in it together. So no matter what candidate you're supporting, I wish you a happy holidays, and I wish the two candidates a happy holidays too. So please welcome Olivia Owen.
Let's give our candidates one more round of applause. After the event, your candidates will be located in our cyber cafe where you can speak with them directly. We would now like to invite our candidates to settle into their designated areas. You guys can go. While we allow them time to do this, I would like to thank my fellow students. Much like the mayoral debate hosted by Compass Academy earlier this month, this debate was designed, planned, and run completely by our senior student government class here at Compass Academy. Our students drafted and finalized the questions and designed the stage. Everything down to the lights and sound was done by us, the students. Thank you for joining us tonight and supporting our school. Please remember to vote on Tuesday, December 5th. To find out where to vote, head to idahovotes.gov. We would now like to invite you to meet with our candidates in our Commons area. Have a great evening.